Hey, y'all, what's up? Welcome to the latest and greatest episode of the Black People Parenting Podcast. Inside of the podcast today, of course, we have these episodes once a month where we talk about health, we talk about wellness, we talk about a lot of different things. Normally, my co host, Dr. G, is on with me. She is moving and shaking and handling some business right now. She will be on in a minute. So don't fret about that. But today's conversation, and I've been having a lot of people, inquire about what this episode is going to be about after I posted it and what exactly we were going to talk about and how we were going to address certain issues. But this is going to be just a conversation about the church, the Christian church, and um, diversity and inclusion. And we're going to talk about some of the things that are going on in the church and how we feel just as folks who might have grown up in the church, as folks who might have strayed from the church, as folks who have been involved in the church. We're going to talk about it from different perspectives. So feel free to drop your comments, drop your any questions that you might have, any comments, any concerns. Feel free to drop those things in the chat. So on the show today, I got two very, very good friends of mine, two really, really good people. When I made the flyer promoting the this particular live, I just put them down as church folks because they're good people, but they're also folks who are actively involved in the church and our church. I actually met both Cam and Chastity at our church here in Raleigh, North Carolina. I guess it's been, man,
It's been a
10
while.
years ago. It's been a
Yeah.
while, almost, I guess
Yeah.
almost 10 years. It don't seem like it, but I guess maybe almost 10 years. Wow, that's a long time. So I know them from just kind of going to church with them and attending church services with them and having conversations with them. And this episode actually was brought about from it was birthed from a conversation that we had at their home a couple of months ago. And I think it's important because I feel like they are people who are kind of the type of people that I can have an open conversation with. They are the type of people that I feel like are progressive in the way that they think, but also I feel like they are rooted in very, very strong morals and very strong beliefs. So I want to be sure that this conversation is a reflection of that. Like I said, Dr. G, she's going to be hopping on. I know y'all love when Dr. G gets up here, so she's going to hop on in just a little bit. So I'm just going to let Cameron and Chastity just kind of say what's up to the people and introduce themselves, and we're gonna bring them in. And I just want to say, hey, y'all, what's happening?
Yeah.
What's going on?
What a nice introduction. I
I know, right?
appreciate that. It make me feel good about
I
myself, you know?
we can
As you should.
hold that down.
as you should, ma'am. So just kind of give us just some background on who y'all are, because like I said, it's no, y'all don't have no fancy titles. I just think that y'all are good people, and y'all are folks who, when I first started attending the church that we attend, y'all welcomed me with open arms. And I've seen y'all do the same thing for so many other people. So I want y'all to just, tell the people, who y'all are. And, if you want to give a little bit of background information on yourselves, then feel free.
Yeah. So again, we're the Johnsons, and I would say we're both educators by profession, but that is really an extension of, I really do feel like who we were created to be individually, but also as a couple as well. I like to tell the story of when we got married. The pastor who married us, he pretty much gave a sermon during our ceremony, and me and him both were like, dude, you got to wrap this up because this is taking too long. But no, in his sermon, he did say that we needed to be don't not to be selfish with our love, and he specifically said, let it spill out in the streets, let it go out. And that's what I do feel like really started us on this have you mission to really open up our homes, open up our lives to people. And so that's what we try to do. We don't get it out right all the time, but that's one of the things that's really important to us in our family, is that our doors really are open to the people we love, but also those who we're still getting to know too, but definitely wanting to extend our love.
Yeah. And I would even add to that and just say, I was a product of a church community. I was a product of, strong men, strong women. Still went to Bible study, went to Sunday school. So it was like all that was something that really impacted me when I grew up and really developed my personal characteristics and how I feel about the world and feel about God. And so I know when we got married, we both were adamant about bringing that to other people. We believe in this idea of community, and it takes a whole village. And so I think we are just really interested in finding a community for us to thrive in, and we recognize the benefit of that in our personal lives. And we also want to be that to other people. We want to provide a community for other people. So I think that was probably how it started. And I guess to give a little background about ourselves, we both have been a part of. I'm a part of men's ministry. I lead that, and Chas used to lead the women's ministry. We both were small group leaders, greeters in the greeting ministry. So we just try to be as involved as possible. And I would just say that we're at the end of the day, we're just people who serve, right? So I think that's the best way to describe us.
Yeah. Well, thank y'all for being here. I got my homegirl. She finally got herself together and decided to join us. Dr. Bambi Gaddis. Hey, Dr. G. I say, hey, Dr. G. Okay, Dr. G can't hear us. Okay, we'll come back to her. Dr. G, let me know when you can. Okay, sure, she don't have herself together. All right, so Cam and Chas, let's talk about your thoughts, your take on the Christian church's current. I don't want to say stance, but just where the church currently stands in terms of inclusivity, right? How would you gauge the pulse of where the church is in terms of inclusivity right now?
Yeah. I definitely think we are progressing when it comes to inclusivity, but definitely have a ways to go. And because we do have all these different denominations and places to worship, um, I feel like there's somewhere that people should feel like they belong, and unfortunately that's not the case. Like I continue to hear folks say like they don't feel like church is a place where they feel safe, where they feel welcome. And so so that's one of the things that I'm hoping to see become more accepting and more but also more vocal as well. I think we've been quiet on a lot of issues that it's time for us not to be quiet on as a church. And I will just say like homosexuality, that's one. Also even alternative lifestyles as well, and just coming from broken places, but not, and that shouldn't stop you from being a part of a church. And unfortunately that is stopping people, I think, from being part of a church family.
I guess I would say I feel like the church is recalibrating. I think we're at a point where there's an old sense of what church is, and people are now realizing that, whether you want to put it due to COVID, due to social, whatever is happening, I think churches are having to recalibrate and figure out what is this new church going to look like. So I don't think, I don't think anybody completely has it figured out, but I do think that people are starting to recognize a need for change. And so I think the question is becoming like, I know for our church, it's kind of like, what does that change look like? What does the new church look like? What does our new community look like? How can we embrace those who may not, feel embraced? And so I think there's a desire, and I think now it's just important for churches to figure out what does that, what's the best steps or the best approach to do that. So.
And Cam, you talked about the pandemic, and I think that it's safe to say that COVID has affected every aspect of the way that we live, right? How would you? I don't think it's something that can be quantified, because I don't think anything about COVID and the results of COVID and what the impact is can be quantified, right? But just based on what you've seen, what do you think the long-term effects of the pandemic are going to be on the church?
I mean, that's a great question. And I'll kind of relate it to this, and this is not the answer. I'm gonna get to the answer, but I was thinking when you asked that question that, to me right now, it feels very similar to when you're running a mile or you're running like a 5K or something like that, and you decide to start walking. And it's like, as soon as you start walking, they say it's hard to get back running again, because you've had that sense of like release, or the sense of ease of walking. I feel like we were carrying this torch, and we were running, for so long. And then when we had that break, I think people started to recognize that, okay, I don't have to do this routine that I was doing. There's another way to do it. And I feel like now it's hard for people to get back into what we would consider traditional church. But to answer your question, the long-term effects, I think reaching people using social media, reaching people, and really, I think before it was almost like people felt like they had to go to church. And so you almost had this draw of people like, when on Sunday I'm supposed to be in church. I think now there's a more of a split of a divide of time. People recognize we're going to have to go and reach people. We're going to have to go and appeal to people. People are not just naturally going to feel the need to come in and be a part of a church group. So I think the church itself is going to have to start to figure out what it's the assets of being a church, that sense of community, the sense of fellowship and connection, and how we can best bring that to the masses. And so I think that's something we're going to have to do. Otherwise, the church may no longer be seen as a necessity. So I think, again, that's why I think we have to recalibrate. We have to figure out how to best connect with the current community. But I will say this: I do feel like if you look through the Bible, this is something that's happened before. And I think God is always, I think he's a person of connection, a person of community. So I feel like I don't see it as a doom and gloom. I just see it as a sense of us being creative and finding ways to really connect with people, reconnect with people. So
that's good. Dr. G is with us. Dr. G, can you hear me, ma'am? You on mute. Let me take you off mute. There you go. Can you hear me, Dr. G?
I said, yes, I can. Thank you, Lord.
Okay, thank you, Lord.
Let me apologize, but I think that I'm coming in at an important time as it relates to advocacy. And, I apologize for being late. There's a young African-American man here who's running for city council. And there is a lot going on within the realty community in potentially stacking the deck. And the more we stack the deck, the less we hear voices from community. And so it was imperative that I be there. And I apologize for my absence. But I think that what Cameron is speaking about is that we're having to reframe how we consider ourselves to be prophets. We've identified, we think of prophecy or prophets, people that tell the truth, if you will, in different ways. And I think we're all being called to be prophets in our own right, that we're going to be called to stand in truth and not fall and drink the Kool-Aid and go along with the program because it's what's familiar to us versus what's in the best interest of our families, our community, our church, however we define that. Mm-hmm. And so I'm grateful to be here today.
Thank you, Dr. G. We are grateful to have you, as always. You look wonderful, by the way.
Lord. I made it to 68 years last week. I am 68 years old and I made it.
You look amazing.
Yes, so every day.
Happy birthday, Dr. G. I didn't know last day was your birthday. Happy birthday. You didn't tell me.
And I'm a great grandmama too, just so you know. I got 2 great grands.
So let me ask Cameron and Chaz, if you could grade the church, right, on its position on diversity, on inclusion, what grade would you give it?
Uh-oh.
Feel free. You don't have to answer. I don't want to. You don't have to answer.
I would say, I guess because my hesitancy is because I never like to speak in generalization, and so I don't want.
Sure.
I think there's some churches that are very diverse. I think there's some churches that are very open. Um, I think often and I think that the interesting thing is there's a perception of church, and then there's the reality of church. 'Cause I think sometimes people don't feel like they may be welcome, but it's like, have you tried to go to a church that that give them a chance to embrace you? So I think sometimes we assume things, right? But I would just say, to answer your question, maybe a C plus. C plus sounds good. C plus.
Okay. Chastity?
Can I talk about the spiritual side of this? One of the things that God gives us is a sense of discernment. And it's just like race to me. If you go into an environment and I don't always have to ask somebody, do they see me a certain way because I'm Black? I know it. I feel it in how they embrace, how they talk, address me. And I think that to your point, what some people are they're not feeling it. They're not feeling welcome. They're not feeling embraced from the initial onset of entry. And that's the part that institutions of faith need to really look at. Do people feel inclusion when they enter? Not after you get in and I got to ask you what you feel about me being here. I should know it when you hit the door.
And I want to say, and Chas, I want you to answer that question also. And I want to say, Dr. G, you might have missed it, but I said that when I had initially met Cameron and Chastity, that was one of the things that let me know that our church was the place for me, because it was so welcoming. And I'm envisioning Miss Rebecca, rest in peace, Miss Rebecca, man. It was just so welcoming. It was just such a great place. It was so warm, and it was just so friendly and inviting. And I wish that every place of worship was like that. I know that's not reality, but like Cam said, you can't generalize, because for every experience that where someone says, well, I went into a church and they didn't welcome me, they didn't ask me my name, they did, like, my experience was the exact opposite, right? And I think that we have to be sure that we are speaking out on the positive things. And I see the comments in Facebook. I'm gonna get to all of those comments, I promise you. But I think we have to speak out about the positive things as well, because I feel like it is balanced. But I think everyone's experience is different. But Chastity, what's your grade?
Yeah, I was thinking a solid C, but it was very just thinking about, there are churches that I know are putting in the work and doing these things to bring about a more diverse community. But what I'm also seeing is those that, I don't know if that's us or not, but that started off with a lot of zeal and a lot of energy as far as having these programs, having these outreach sessions, and then we've lost steam. and then it appears that it was lip service, and that isn't good, because then people have a feeling of like, yeah, you started this way, but now what? Now what's happening to all the energy you were putting in, especially during this couple of 2020, when things were at their peak. And then, when I'm not even gonna say, I shouldn't say peak, but things were steaming, things were hot, and now we've lost steam, and that programming and energy isn't there. So that's been discouraging to see, but that's kind of where I feel like we are right now.
Yeah. Somebody in the comments, and I'm sorry, I can't see the names on StreamYard, doesn't let me see the names unless you actually sign into the little thing or whatever that they make you sign into. But somebody said in the comment section that we have to be willing to admit we've been wrong in so many areas. And Dr. G, we've had this conversation over the last year with other guests that we've had on the show about the perspective and the approach that the church takes on things like homosexuality, right? And we've had folks on the show who have discussed their experiences. So, Dr. G, I want you to chime in a little bit about the areas where I'm not going to say that the church was wrong because I don't feel like I'm in a position to say that. Um, the areas where people may have felt like the church has been wrong in their approach or approaches to certain areas.
Um, uh, Again, I believe that the way we approach, um, there's a commonality in how people approach issues of concern. Healthcare, for example. If I am accustomed to not holding my physician accountable for how I'm being treated, I'm more likely to handle my situations the same way in my personal, intimate relationships with my children, and similarly with my faith. Um, I believe that if we, in fact, think that the faith community has not been supportive of diversity, which continues is across a continuum, whose responsibility is it to address it? In one respect, clergy has to be responsible, because I question whether or not these issues are even discussed and to what degree in their spaces where they're being trained. But the other part is that we cannot continue to be blind to parishioners where we never go to our pastor and say, and I've had to do it. I chose to do it. I didn't have to. I chose to go to my pastor and say, I am concerned that I'm getting inboxed because of my work in HIV, for example. I'm being inboxed in church. I'm being approached after the sermon with people in conflict about things that were said about same gender loving people, which, by the way, they were, although they were tithers or they played some other significant role in the church, and asking me, the person who's not in charge of the flock, what I think about it. And I felt as a parishioner and a believer who was getting something from his ministry to ask him, what do you want me to say to them? What do you want me to say to them about the position of this space of faith, about being gay, about being same gender loving, about being a transgendered person? What do you want me to say? And I cannot tell you that I walked away with an answer. I can tell you that I still struggle with the dissonance of continuing to go in a space where I know that only certain people are validated. Only certain people can get married. Only certain people can sit in a pew and not walk out traumatized. I struggle with it, and I admit it. And so what other people do to address that in their place of faith, I have no idea. But I think it starts with taking responsibility for my own feelings, my own dissonance, my own sense of trauma, even though I don't fit into any of those categories, not even as a person living with HIV. But I see myself as a prophet in the context of advocacy, and that I have a responsibility to share what people have said to me. So I have no guilt.
So one of the Facebook commenters said most clergy don't have these conversations. Churches are just trying to stay open without realizing if care increased, things would shift. So the question that I want to pose I'll throw this to Cam and Chastity. How can churches be more inclusive, right? How can they be more supportive? Like, we have these conversations, like, the churches aren't doing enough, right? But I want to talk about how we can resolve the issues. Like, what are some of the strategies that you think could be put into place?
How did you get so open? How was Mr. Chavis able? How was he able to walk in your church and walk out with a sense of belonging? Walk out. What did you do that made him feel like he found the right place?
One of the things that happens at our church now that I think is pretty powerful, at the end of the sermon, there's this time of Q&A where the pastor will preach, but there's a time where the congregation asks questions. And in my church, being brought up in the church, I've never seen that happen before. And where, there is this coming off the pulpit, if you will, and really engaging with the congregation in a way where, you can ask whatever question and it is talked about, addressed on Sunday morning, not, on the side conversation. It's addressed all together. So that's one of the very simple way, but a very powerful way, I think.
And I guess to answer that question, and it probably goes to Dion, your question as well, is, and I don't think all people embrace this, but I know for me, we preach a lot about brokenness to blessedness. So when I see Dion, I don't see a finished product. I don't see somebody who I think is, we all are trying to grow. So
we real broke over here. I'm just gonna tell you, we broke all up over here.
And so,
a million people.
I guess to answer your question, when I first met Dion, it was just kind of like, it's somebody who I felt like, I wanted to embrace. It wasn't necessarily because of him or what he looked like, anything like. It was just like, anytime I feel like people come into church, they're coming to find a community. They're coming to find some kind of closer connection to God. And I feel like the people of God, the church itself, should be that connection. And so that's always been my approach to, I remember even when I was greeting or whatever I was doing, it's kind of like, how can I, be, to embrace people in a way that I feel like I want God, or I feel like God has embraced me. Right. So I think that to me was my approach to interacting with almost anybody that I meet. And so I think somebody mentioned something about the struggle in your comments, the struggle of, I forgot, not lining up to what God's word is. I think that's one of the comments. And I think that is true. I think the fact that we sometimes isolate or alienate people, I think a lot of times it's because of fear. I think it's because of not, like you said, not having those conversations, whatever that conversation may be. I think being open to a conversation, being open to talking to people, I think would allow for a lot of the walls and barriers to kind of be broken down, so that we all can feel included. Because I think a lot of times people want to be heard, people want to be seen. And I don't think it has to change my personal views, but I can embrace that your views are different. And I think that to me is where I feel like it seems like there's often an attack on each person's opinions and views, as opposed to let's communicate, let's figure out where each one of us are and how we can grow and learn together. And so, yeah.
Question. I have a faith in a colleague who is a pastor, who was approached by a same-gender loving couple to marry them. And they shared their fear that if they were, in fact, to marry this couple, that they would be cast out of their association, and that the political ramifications for them financially and otherwise would be of great magnitude. My question is, do you marry same-gender loving couples?
They're not preachers.
We're not preachers. Yeah, we're not preachers.
They just church folks, out of you. They just church folks.
Okay, I'm just asking. I'm sorry. So I assume you attend a specific faith space.
Yes.
Would your pastor do that?
Well, that's a good question.
That is a great question. So I don't even want to begin to speak for him. We have not. I would say that we have not currently. We do have people who are of different relationship church, so they're not. They attend our church. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying, like, I don't know as far as would they get married at our church. I don't have an answer for that one. So I would let him speak to that. But I will say that I do think it's important. Again, I think that as a conversation is interesting. I have not had that conversation with him, so I think that's a conversation that would be interesting to have. And I guess I would probably say, I don't want to speak for him.
Homework.
Say what now?
Yeah.
I said that might be your homework.
Yeah.
So I want to ask, how do you all think this conversation varies based on where you are geographically? Because I feel like in this country, we're in a space where number one, church and politics kind of are not beginning to mix, but we're starting to see that for some churches, we the term evangelical or white evangelical churches and things like that, and we see the impact that they've had on politics. And I think a lot of that stuff could be based on where they are in southern states and Florida for one, and all of those things. But do you think that it matters where we are in the country geographically on how progressive the church is? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
That's for you, Cam and Chess. I'm sorry.
I don't think it matters. I don't think so. I think this is all over the nation. We're really world. I think this is where we are right now as a faith community.
Cam, what you think?
I guess the question I'm asking, are you saying that do I feel like the environment impacts the church's role? Is that what you're saying?
Well, what I'm saying is, so we live in an area that for a lot of folks is considered as the Bible Belt.
Yeah.
Right. I remember. I'll give you an example. When I first moved to North Carolina, of course, everyone knows I did radio, but I was on a hip hop radio station, and there was the old school R&B station, and there was a gospel station within the same cluster. And the R&B station would play gospel music on Sundays. So my argument was like, why are you playing gospel music on Sundays when there's a whole gospel station that people can listen to, right? And the pushback was, well, because of where we are geographically, we're in the Bible Belt. People here, they're so used to hearing gospel music on an R&B station on Sundays, right? Whereas if you go to another part of the country, let's say New York, for example, that wouldn't even be a conversation, right? So that's just one way to look at it. Like the further south you go, the more religion focused the area is said to be. So are these same types of issues, do you think, as prevalent, and I mean by not being progressive, in other regions of the country opposed to where we live?
I guess I would say yes and no. I think that a lot of churches have issues with diversity, or slash inclusion. I think that's a common. Now the demographic of the church might be different. Like I know we have a friend who's up in DC, and his church is primarily 20s to 30-year-olds, right? But it's because of the environment that his church is in. Whereas our church is more of the 40s, 50s. Like we have older people at our church, but I think it's the diagram. And I think if you were in California, I think the demographic would be different. But I do think most churches are having issues with where do you draw that line on what you believe to be true and the expectation of the community around you, right? How do you hold true to some values without excluding other people's values? And I think that to me is a challenge that it doesn't matter if you're old, young, white or black, whatever you are, that's going to be a issue, right? So I think it's something that anytime you got more than 4 people around you, you're gonna have to figure out your differences. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's.
And to your point, I don't want to miss this. You talked about age, right? And I think we're in a time period where, I mean, if we keep it at 100, like young folks ain't really pressed about going to church, right? Young folks ain't really pressed about hearing the word. There's a generation of young folks that went 2.5 years of their lives without having to step foot in a church. Do you think it's the church's responsibility to recruit, and I use that term loosely, younger people back into the church? Or do you think they just now have to say, this just is what it is, and we're going to work with what we got?
We definitely have I think we have to have a mission to bring people into the church. I don't care what age they are. But since we're specifically talking about young people, yes, we do have a responsibility to to build relationships with them, to engage them in a way, to bring them in. And I think you brought up an interesting point about the radio piece and the Sunday gospel station. That I think is problematic, because when I see this divided lifestyle, that raises an eyebrow. Like, why is it that my life is one way on Sunday, but the rest of the week it looks another way? And if you are, and I'm a Christian, so if I'm going to profess my faith, then that should bleed through all areas of my life, my work relationships, like every area. And so therefore, seeing that kind of dual lifestyle, very different, that I think can be problematic. So.
Dr. G, you got something? Oh, I'm sorry, Cam, you want to say something?
Well, I'm still thinking. Now, it was your question about because I think I keep looking at the comments, but somebody mentioned that their parents aren't going either. And I was going to say, as somebody in education, I think the problem, not the problem, I don't want to say that. The challenge is that it happens. This is not a church issue, right? This is a society issue, right? So I think whether it's school, whether it's church, you can even go to, I was having this conversation with somebody about family reunions, how people don't go to family reunions anymore, right? So I think the ability for people to make their own choices, their parents not, because I think for me, my parents told us we were going to church, right? That was the time that I grew up in. So once you give somebody the freedom to choose, then you're going to most likely have the kind of community we're reaching now. But I was thinking when you answered, to be quick, my challenge, to me, the challenge is what you just said. So you have a community of people who did not grow up in church, dictating to the church what the church should be, right? And so it's like when you're trying to reach people who haven't grew up, and I'm not saying grew up in the sense of rituals or things like that. I'm talking about just who didn't grow up in a community where they saw healthy men worshiping or healthy women worshiping, or what it looks like to do loaves and feed people and go to nursing homes, to give of yourself, right? And so they're thinking about their individual relationship with Christ. And then when they come to church, it's like you have to meet that, but also show them about the collective of Christ, right? How God was about community and how it's not just about your own faith and your own walk, how you have to be connected with people in order to grow, which is the same thing in business. It's the same thing in school. Like, we all work better in community. So I think, to me, that's the challenge, though. It's how do you reach people who may not have grown up with, seeing church as a value, and reach them in a way to make them see it as valuable, right? And without losing your ethics, your structure, how you feel about how church should flow. So to me, it's a hard challenge. It's a really, really hard challenge.
So let me ask this: do you think the church? And again, I know we're not talking generalizations, right? Do you think overall the church is ready for a conversation where the young people are leading the conversations to say, this is what we need in order to in order to participate in what you're offering? Because again, we come from traditional seen and not heard. We come from, this is the way that it's going to be. It's going to be praise and worship here, and then it's going to be the pastor preaches here, then it's going to be the offering, then it's going to be blah 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 blah. Then after that, we can go back. We might have some fried chicken for you. That's where we come from. Might have some fish. That's where we come from. Are we ready to have a conversation where we say we gonna step back as the elders, and maybe we're gonna let the young people lead and listen more than we speak? Anybody feel free to chime in. Dr. G, you're talking.
Chastity made mention of it earlier when she's talked about the intentional space that was created after service for the parishioners to engage intimately with the pastor and respond to questions or whatever, like you might do in Bible study.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's the leadership. It is the leadership sets the precedent for how we respond in a faith setting. You know, I have concerns about focusing our conversation solely on Christianity. I have colleagues at HVTN who are Baha'i, who are Muslim, who are Buddhist. And although I am totally unaware of the rituals of those faiths, I can't help but think that they have their own unique way of how they orient their children, how they introduce them to the higher power, and how they act that out. But my main point is it's leadership. It is the parent. And if the parent is no longer interested in we know what our parents had to go through to get us to church. I mean, it was way more than just saying you're going. It was the whole ritual of making sure you were up on time and dressed. My dad would leave you. He literally would leave you. If you were not on time. He would get in his car, drive, and you would know in your soul that if you were not there when the organ revved up, and we didn't have Ubers back then.
Oh, no.
And I don't remember how we got there. Maybe we took a cab. I'm not clear. But maybe it was fear. I'm not clear what it is. But what it taught me was this issue around be on time. That's what it taught me. Be on time. Not necessarily be on time because I would miss God, but be on time.
Well, you was late today, Dr. G, so
and guess what? But yeah, I was.
I'm just joking. I'm just joking. I'm just joking.
I mean, I'm open to reprimand. But
it's a joke.
But when I look at a group of young people and it's 12 o'clock at night, and I know they're in middle or high school, and I ask my husband, I say, what are they doing out? How are they out at this age? Just like when I look at all the murders that are happening with our young boys, I mean, I could tell you about 2 different incidences in 1 week where teenagers literally assassinated their peers. You keep asking, where are the parents? Where are the caregivers? Where are the authority figures that these young people are able to maneuver in this way? And so we cannot separate these kind of real life issues with what's happening in faith. What's happening? I see that comment, it says people are disenchanted. I think it's way bigger than disenchantment. I think they're questioning what does it matter? What does it even matter if I go sit in a pew and listen to the word from what I see out here in the streets? I struggle with it as a parent. I struggled with it as a grandparent. And I imagine I'm going to be struggling as a great-grandparent now, trying to help my great-grandchildren understand who God is and why it's important that they give him time. Mm-hmm. But that is my responsibility as a believer. And they may tell me to kiss off, grandma, kiss off. You know, I ain't trying to hear that right now. And I've heard that. But I've told them clearly, I won't stop. I'm going to continue to say it because I believe it. And you'll figure it out one day.
Somebody in the comments said this generation needs proof. And as I think about that, I'm wondering what type of proof can we offer?
We should be the proof.
Yeah. So that's what I was going to say. Let me just jump in. So I know for me, and just to use a personal example, like my father was very clear on his shortcomings. Like he never sugarcoated his faults to me. And he was very clear on why he had what he had. And he was quick to say it was because of who God was. So he would literally show us, different situations he was in, or talk about different. He would take us to his hometown and we would see, where he grew up. And he would just talk about the different ways that God provided. And then I think that's the thing that I was going to say is we have to disarm the position of, I don't want to say you shouldn't have deacons and elders and things like that, but I think they have to be willing to sit amongst the people to get rid of that mystique of this pedestal, so that we can see them as people. And I think that would allow the proof that people need to see. And I know for what Chas was mentioning earlier, the whole point of us having those conversations in the church is to allow people to understand that your voice, you're a part of the sermon, right? He wants to make sure that you're clear that you're not here to be talked to, but to be in discussion and relationship with, right? And I think that, to me, it disarms people from feeling like they are beneath, right? Or so then it allows so when you're asking, can we let the younger generation lead? I think to me, it has to start with the current generation being that example, so that the younger generation are willing to bring their opinions forward. I don't know if you can just let go of the reins and hope that the younger generation grab them. I think that sounds problematic, but I do think it is a situation where if we can try to be as transparent as we possibly can, because we talk about being a new creation in Christ. We talk about how the old things have passed away. We're new now that we're in our faith. We have to be willing to show that and say that this was who I was. This is what I have become. And I think that would help people to see the proof some proof. I mean, I think you still got to live life, and you still got to, go through your own fires. But I think it will let them to see who they're following and why they should follow. Right.
I have a consultant who was a ex-gang member. He was a blood. And he, now that he's Reverend Doctor, he never hesitates to share his story about the kind of person he was and who he was when he was a blood. And so what Cameron is really, lifting up is, and what I see comments in the chat, is about the lack of honesty, the lack of transparency that people are looking for and expecting now from leadership. And when they know that you're totally unreputable in telling truth, and they can look on the internet literally and look at the amount of disinformation and misinformation being promoted, it doesn't lend itself toward wanting to align themselves with the faith community. And so to Cameron's note, no parent, no leadership person wants to talk about their shortcomings like your dad did. But at the end of the day, it's that willingness to tell you where he fell short that really led to the level of respect that you had for him, and certainly set an example for you about how you should be dealing with your offspring and being transparent with them about who you are and who you've been.
I think that's good, Dr. G. And I also want to ask this question. I think we started talking about the internet, and I've heard a couple of things about the internet, the World Wide Web, Beyonce's internet, whatever you want to call it. And I think we are dealing with a generation who is getting a lot of their information. I would probably say 97.2% of their information from the World Wide Web. Some of it is true, some of it is not. But what I will say is that a lot of these young people, and young and old folks, consider themselves as being more spiritual than religious. How do we make religion cool? Like is it possible, right? Because spirituality is cool, right? And and again, this is just me on the outside looking in. I'm a parent of a 19-year-old. I see the things. And as people who profess as being themselves as being more spiritual than religious, or whatever the case may be, I don't judge. This is a no judgment zone. But to some, it looks cool, right? Whether it be, you have your crystals, whether it be you have your sage, whatever the case may be, it's cool to do these things for a lot of people. How do we make do we need to make? That's a
I
better
know about
question.
all that stuff. I know about
Do-
all that stuff. The ruins, the crystal, the
Mhm.
the
That
other
necklace looks cool. That's
the
a cool necklace.
other aspects of seeking a higher source.
Mhm.
It's when we start wanting to put labels on it that people go in that direction. My question is, why can't we do both? Why can't we believe in God? Why can we not read our Bibles? Why can we not look within that word, especially the red part, about what we should and how we should be treating folks, but yet still explore God in his whole entirety, because it's slavery that taught us the Bible is the only space. And I'm giving my personal opinion. There are many ways to seek God. And in Christianity, what we've done is force people into a box and said, you can't get to God unless you read this. I believe you can read the Bible, but you can also find him in the earth. You could find him, her, in other practices that help us connect with our spiritual being. And in that case, we resurrect who he is and manifest it out in the world. But putting folks in a box is what people are rebelling against.
So what I'm hearing you say, Dr. G, is that it's okay if I listen to Young Jeezy on my way to church.
If
It's
you
okay.
get, I can't say I know all the lyrics,
I
but
battle with that sometimes.
well, at the end of the day, the question is, when you get out the car, how do you treat people?
Right.
Do they
Very
see
true.
you? Can they see God in you?
I can treat
Plenty,
them great and then
plenty of faith leaders listen to rap, and a lot of them do it because they want to be in tune with what these kids are listening to, so they can use it as a reflection point and during the word.
I guess to go to that last point, I would say that I think that might be an area where, and I don't want to speak again. I can't speak for the whole church, but I know that there's often seem to be like a either or, like this or that, meaning that okay, you can't listen to rap music because you're a Christian. You can't do this. And I think to me, it's more so like, what is the thing that you wake up to? What is the thing that you when you hear about that you might get like, do you get defensive when somebody say Young Jeezy or who are your rapper of choices isn't the best rapper? Do you get
money back, yo.
yeah, does that get you riled up? Or if somebody says something about God, you know what I'm saying? I think to me it's more so like, um, I think we always compare it. I think you can listen to rap and do Christianity. I don't think there's a separation, but I just think that God should be the thing that trumps everything, right? I feel like if I'm trying to think of a good word and I can only quote Jay-Z or somebody, that's like, have I put him in that position other where he should not be, right? And I think that's where the question comes in. It's like, we often put it as like, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that, but it's like, is God the focus of your life? Because he's the one that's guiding your life. Now, these other things are being things that you can do for entertainment, but it should not become something that you go to as your prime source of either information or knowledge or even guidance, right? So I think that's where the trouble comes in. But I would say, and I think somebody mentioned in the comments, I'm not, and this is for me, I'm not into the cool Christian world. That's not my. Because I think it's just like somebody saying, "How do you make education cool?" It's like either you gonna, and I think to me, I always feel like that back with Christianity. Either you gonna come to it early or you gonna come to it late. So either you gonna try it your way and realize, you know, or So I feel like to me, it's about being consistent. It's about being truthful and honest. It's about and I think if we're compassionate, if we are actually showing love to people, if we're doing the things that the word and Bible talks about, people will recognize that. And so I think people find love and compassion cool. I think people find honesty and grace and mercy cool. And hopefully we can get to the point where people start seeing truth is cool, because I don't think we see truth is cool. But I think sometimes you got to be truthful with people. And so I think when you just do those things and you're loving on people, then the rest will take care of itself. So
Hmm. I think that's a good place to close out the conversation. I think, no, seriously, I think, I mean, we only got an hour, Cam. I think that's a great.
These are heavy topics, though, man. We can do this all day.
This is a very heavy topic, and I'll ask this. I want to continue this conversation. So at some point, I would like, if Dr. G gives her permission, because she is the boss and the ones who approves these things to happen. Maybe we could come back and we could reconvene. And I definitely want to bring Jacinta, who is in the comments, Reverend Jacinta, who is in the comments, into this conversation. And I know Pedro Silva, again, I can't see everyone's name, but I know he was at least in the comments earlier. And I have a feeling that some of these later comments are from him, just from knowing him through conversations that I've had. I would like to bring him into this conversation. So maybe we could set something up where we could do a part 2. Because I definitely feel like we have.
Right, so
Yes.
yes, part 2 is possible. Number 2, I was quite intrigued with the number of comments that were in the chat and feel like they really need to be advanced. I'll say in closing, one of the things that I love and appreciate about HVTN and this faith initiative is that they are giving us an opportunity to have this type of dialogue. Number 2, we don't have to agree. That's the other part. We don't have to agree. We don't even have to. I mean, it's not even about agreeing to disagree. It's that the whole focus of HVTN and helping communities, faith leaders like yourselves translate. Well, how does faith impact science? How do we move people in faith so that they understand what is disinformation and what is misinformation? And back in COVID, we had individuals who were totally against vaccines. But my job, nor my consultant's job, like Mr. Chavis, is to confront them, traumatize them, or try to force them in our way of thinking. Our goal is to explore. Our goal is to understand what motivates, what attitudes and beliefs do people have that drive them in certain directions. And so I'm grateful that Dion allows me to come on. That I have met some just phenomenal experts, people who really have a grasp of how do we advance this dialogue in the Black community. And so Cameron and Chastity, I really appreciate you allowing me in your space because this is valuable conversation, and certainly part 2 would be necessary so that we don't end up in this, so we can talk further, and some of the people who had commentary may have an opportunity to express their view.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll do that. So we'll pause here. We'll put a pin in this conversation. Cameron and Chastity Johnson, thank you so much for your contributions. It was great hearing from you and hearing your perspectives, as always. The coolest couple that I know. And I just love talking to them. So we'll be back next week next month, actually, with another really dope conversation. Dr. G, thank you. All right, y'all. That's Black People Parenting. This episode is over. I'll see you on the next one. Peace.
All right. Dog.